Hello and welcome back to the Jim RPG channel. So today I've got some very special hardware. Anbernic were very nice to send me the RG503, and I saw some preview photos of this when the rumors first came out, and I wasn't expecting to get this device, but I'm very lucky that Anbernic decided to send me one, so thank you so much for them to send it to me. And that means that we get to take a look at this device and see if it's something that you're interested in. So I've been pretty busy of late, and I'm not gonna lie, I was playing Elden Ring, of course, but also I've got a lot of family stuff as well to deal with, and I'll have a lot of family stuff to deal with going forward as well. So I won't be able to do my usual round of hardware videos for this, but today what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of a unboxing and first impressions video, and then we'll just play some games on it, and I'll give you my thoughts on it as well, and I'll try to follow up with a couple of other videos on this device if I have time. Let's get straight into the unboxing. So it comes in your very typical Anbernic white box, and we'll just set aside the console just for a second and have a look under the box. So it comes with your typical Anbernic manual, which is fine as a reference thing, but really it's not very useful. And oh, there's some Chinese on the back there. There's a USB-C to USB-A adapter, and so you'll need to provide your own wall adapter. Now, one interesting thing was that I tried to charge this RG503 with a fast charger that I had for my phone, but that didn't actually work, and I had to use my 1 amp 5 volt charger, an old iPhone charger that I had lying around. So that seemed to work for me. It might be different, it might just be because of that one fast charger, I don't know, but just letting you guys know out there. So any old charger that you got lying around should do the trick. Now, normally when I actually order these devices, I don't actually get the one with the games on them, but Anbernic were kind enough to send me one with a SD card, and so we're going to be using this to play some games on it a little bit later. So they also provide a screen protector as well, and just to show you guys the screen protector, so this is for a 5-inch screen. Don't know if you can see that very well, but it's interesting because, you know, it used to be that 5-inch screens were very large, and now 5-inch screens are kind of tiny in comparison to all the very large screens that we've got. I mean, I've got my Switch right here, and the 5-inch versus the 6-inch screen is just way... This might not even be 5 inches. I mean, who knows how big it is. I haven't measured it, but the Switch is 6 inches. And this is a 5-inch screen. But we'll put that back, and then we'll open up the handheld. Okay, so put that back. Okay, so here we go. So Anbernic sent me the greenish blue device, which is not my favorite color. They have other colors. They've got a black one, a blue one, and a bronze gray one. And I would have preferred the other colors, but I'm not complaining because they were very nice to send this to me. So yeah, there it is. There is the console. And just to give you guys a bit of a size comparison, we have the RG503, my favorite retro handheld, the RG351P, which is a 3.5-inch 3:2 aspect ratio device. And we also have, let me see if I can get the other one in the shot. the RG552 at the bottom there. So I believe this is a 5.5-inch screen, if I'm not mistaken. I'll correct it if it's not, but I believe this is 5.5 inches and this one is 5 inches. Now, one thing that Anbernic products seem to always have in common is that they have very similar layouts for all of their devices. So you can see here that the face buttons on the front are pretty much all the same on all of their devices, and I think that's just a thing that they like to do, and keep it simple for everybody who use their devices. And even along the top there, they try to keep all of their ports and everything like that more or less the same. They switched the USB-C ports around a little bit here, so you've got the 2 USB-C ports there, and then the 2 USB-C ports on the RG552 there. They have the inline shoulder buttons, and they also have the headphone jack, and they have the mini HDMI as well on top. And then on the bottom, they have pretty much the same as the RG552. They have 2 micro SD cards, and they also have a reset button and a function button. We'll get into the function button in just a second. They have a power button on the left and volume buttons on the right. So as you can see, they should be pretty similar for both these devices here. Now, that function button is actually used for something like RetroArch if you want to get into the RetroArch menu, which actually for me is a little bit annoying when you're actually playing on the device, and then you're going to have to go and push it with your thumb and then the B button as well to get into the RetroArch menu. I find that a little bit cumbersome. I wish that the function button was right here on top here, because I think that is still fairly out of the way, but I guess they just didn't want to do that. They wanted to keep their layouts the same. Now, one thing that they have slightly improved on is the inline buttons here for the shoulder buttons, and the L2 and R2 is raised a little bit more than they did for the previous console. So I think there were some complaints from people where with the RG552, because the sides were very vertical, it was a little bit hard to reach the L2 and R2 buttons and also use the analog sticks. So that was a little bit annoying. But now they've improved the body of the RG503, and they've had it so that it curves a little bit towards the top there, and so you can get your fingers around a little bit easier. Now, that does make it a little bit of a weird looking shape, and I honestly prefer the look of the vertical body a little bit better. Same as with the RG503, I prefer the vertical sides, but I do understand why they might have gone for the curved sides here for ergonomics. Now, one thing on the back is that they have these grippy areas where we'll see if they actually help at all. They used to have these rubber pads, which honestly I thought that was more for if you wanted to just leave it on the counter or something, and so it wasn't as slippy. So I think they've changed that design there on the back as well. Okay, so let me just rip this off, the screen protector thingy off, and then we'll get stuck into playing some games. And I have no idea why they made it so hard to take this off. Okay, here we go. So it does come off, but I think you've just got to be a little bit careful, because I mean, this is, you don't want to like just take out something from underneath the console. and honestly this is not a very good customer experience. But hopefully I won't damage the screen at all. Okay, so you do need to be a little bit careful with this thing. It doesn't come out that easily. Okay, so one thing we want to do is put our games in as well. And I'm gonna plug in the music as well. Okay, so one thing that's going to immediately strike you is that the screen is incredible. Now this is an OLED screen, and I believe it is the same OLED screen as the Vita 1000. I can't confirm that, but it seems like it's the same size. It is a 5-inch screen, and it is 960 by 544p if I'm not mistaken. I'll check that up later. But with 540p, I actually don't mind that resolution at all. I thought that was perfectly fine for Vita games, and it's going to be fine here too, especially for a lot of the older games which are like Nintendo games or Super Nintendo games where you don't really have that much resolution anyway, and if you just bump that up 2 times, it's going to look just fine on the screen. Now Anbernic were nice enough to include a whole range of systems on their SD card. So let's go through some of these games. So we've got Final Burn Neo, and then we've got MAME, we've got Wonder Swan Color, Capcom System 1, 2 and 3, MSX, although I don't, oh they do have some games, PC Engine, NES, Nintendo Game Boy, SNES, N64, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, NDS. Now I don't know. Openbor. Now there's some interesting games that they've included for this, which we'll go through in a second. And Sega Master System, Mega Drive, Game Gear, Dreamcast, Neo Geo, Neo Geo Pocket, Sony PlayStation, PSP, and I believe that is about it. And while we're at PSP, it might be a good time to just talk a little bit about the processor. As you know, I've been testing a lot of the other consoles and then seeing what types of games they can play, and it seems as though that the RG503, the processor is somewhere in between the RG552 and the RG351P. So as you guys know, I tested the RG552 and it doesn't play all PSP games, but what I noticed was that it was able to play a lot of the 30 FPS games. And I did have a quick look at the 8 games that they've supplied here, and it feels as though that this system should be fine to play PSP games at 30 FPS. So one game I tested was Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, and that played perfectly fine at 30 FPS at 1x resolution. So I believe that this system should have enough to play many of the 30 FPS games on Sony PSP. So if you're wondering, should I pick this up for PSP? Well, there's going to be 60 FPS games that just won't play at 60 FPS. They'll play at 30 FPS. Or they just won't feel as good. But there are going to be a lot of other games that you should be able to play 30 FPS in. Now I haven't tested this at all, but hopefully I will get some time to do a bit of testing for that. But that's my gut feeling, is that you should be able to run 30 FPS games. And honestly, if you don't know, that's actually quite a lot of games in the library. I would say maybe even as far as 50% of the library you should be able to play on the RG503. So I think there are going to be people who are going to test this and then say, well, you can't play Ridge Racer and you can't play Tekken 6 because these are all 60 FPS games. If you play something like GTA or Final Fantasy Crisis Core, or pretty much any RPG games on here, you should be able to run them on the RG503. Okay, so while we're here, why not we just play Sony PSP, and let me show you GTA Vice City running on this device. Now one thing you want to do is go into the function menu for PSP and go into settings, and you want to turn the frame skipping on, and you want to turn auto frame skip on. If you don't do this, then it's not going to add a frame skip, and then the frame rate will be half of what you've just seen there. So instead of it being 30, it will be 15. I'll just show you what that looks like. So as you see there, it's 50. I don't know if you can see, but it's 15 out of 30, and that's because it can't get up to 30. It might be like between like 25, 20 or whatever, and it just feels like it wants to drop back down to 15 and then double that frame rate. So I think that is what's happening in the background. So it's actually better if you can add a frame skip and if you do that, the frame skip is barely noticeable. The frame skip is barely noticeable, but it will feel much better. You'll be playing at 30 FPS. Let me get that bike back. Whoops. Whoa. Okay. Let's drive this car instead. Okay. So you can see that it plays just as well as RG552 for GTA Vice City. Definitely dips a little bit more, but it's not that bad. And the other thing is that, I mean, this console or this handheld doesn't cost as much as the RG552 does either. So what you're missing out on is really just those 60 FPS games. And I would say that the RG552 doesn't handle PSP those 60 FPS games that well anyways. So I don't think you'd be missing that much. You are probably just missing out on, say, 10, 20 of the best PSP games. So things like God of War and Ridge Racer 1 and 2, Gran Turismo, Tekken 6. So games like that, you wouldn't be able to play those on 60 FPS. You could still probably play some of those on 30 FPS, but the experience definitely is not as good. The game feels completely different to play something like Ridge Racer at 30 FPS. So, but you can just play whatever 30 FPS games that you can, like say Final Fantasy games on this will just play fine, I think. But we'll see. I will try to do a little bit more testing and see if this really does play all of the 30 FPS games. Another thing that I'm really surprised about is that it looks really good on this screen. Like, okay, the screen is not as big as the RG552, but I kind of like this size. It just feels like it's just the right size to play handheld games, especially handheld games from the last era. It keeps that similar size. It's a little bit bigger than the original, which means that it's improved a little bit more, but it doesn't feel like it blows it up massively and makes it a completely different experience. Like when you play Game Boy games, for example, on a massive 6-inch screen or even on your TV, that experience changes quite a bit. Okay, so as you can see, I've been driving around the city. I haven't done any of the missions as yet, but you can see that the frame rate is doing just fine in this game. So we'll move on and play something else now. So to get out of this, you have to press the function button and the B, which is a bit annoying, as I said before. So just to show you what a 30 FPS game looks like, let's play Tekken 6. See if I can turn up the sound a little bit for this one. So, one thing is that I don't believe the volume buttons work for PSP only. So you have to go into PPSSPP to use the global volume button to set your sound volume. So we'll just do that. Now here I'm using an auto frame skip here as well, and we'll see the effects of that, and also turning that off.
Get ready for the next attack. Round one.
So you can see that it's still fairly playable. It's in the 40s. But it's not rock solid 60 FPS, so you're just not able to get that. So let's try it with the auto frame skip off. So if you do that, then it will try to lock itself to the 30 FPS. So you might like this if you like it a little bit smoother, but you won't be able to get up to 60 FPS.
Get ready for the next battle. Round one. Fight.
So you can probably hear that the audio is crackling a little bit. And I would not buy this to play Tekken 6 or any of the 60 FPS PSP games. If you want to do that, then I would spend a little bit more money and get the Power Kitty X18S, which honestly is not as well built as this system. Like, this just feels like a much better system, but that has a stronger processor which will allow you to play all of these PSP games at 60 FPS.
Get ready for the next battle.
Okay, so we're going to end that and move on to something else. Okay, so I think it'd be interesting to see if Third Strike works. So let's try that. So when I was younger, I used to be in the arcades all the time, but my generation was more Street Fighter 2, so I never ended up playing Street Fighter 3 at all. So I have no idea really how to play this, but it should more or less be the same. One thing about Street Fighter games I've never liked is using the shoulder buttons. It just makes it so much harder. So in terms of doing Dragon Balls, Dragon Punches and Fireballs, the buttons feel pretty much the same as the other systems. They feel fine. They generally feel pretty good to me. Now there was one game where I was jamming the buttons and they didn't go as fast as I'd like, so I need to think about what game that was. But that is one problem with the face buttons, is that they're not very fast. So if you need to hit those face buttons as fast as you can, this isn't the system for you. So, I guess this is the special version. It's so much easier playing the special version. Oh crap. Oh, you've got unlimited lives as well. It's always weird to me how the Chinese manufacturers, they decide for you things like this, that you want to have the special version rather than the original version. I reckon that most enthusiasts would probably want to have the original version over the hacked version, although I could be wrong there. But I think you can see that this is a pretty great place to play NES games as well. But really, any system under $100 would be a great system to play NES games. Honestly, so I wouldn't buy this for playing NES games, but it does look good on this system. Okay. Let's play a Game Boy game. And just wanted to play something easy to show you what it looks like to play Game Boy on this device. So you've got the skins as well for this, so you just have to go into the function menu. So this is the regular Game Boy look, but I always like to play it with a different skin. And these are called GB colorizations, or internal palettes. So let's go in here and just pick the GB light. I do like this look. And it just makes it feel like a totally different game for me. So I always try to experiment with all of those internal palettes and play something that is a little bit like the game. Honestly, this is great to give the kids something like this. You could probably give them a little bit of a cheaper device. Well, see daisies. Wait, I just went right through him. So but as you can see, like if you're playing Game Boy games on this, Game Boy starts to look a little bit bigger than what it used to be, which is fine. It just, the experience changes a little bit. One thing I'm always surprised about is that Kirby seems to sell better than Metroid, which honestly surprises me because, like, I always thought Metroid had more fans. So I guess that shows you how much I know about Nintendo. But whoops. It just seemed like the type Metroid just seems like the type of game that Nintendo fans always ask for. They want something a little bit more darker, more science fiction-y. Whereas Kirby is kind of like that sort of kids game that Nintendo fans generally want less of. Alright, just because I've been watching the NBA, we're gonna play NBA Jam here. This was such an old favorite of mine. I remember my friend bringing his SNES around to my place, and we played NBA Jam till 4 AM in the morning. So let me find it. Now I believe Tournament Edition is much better than the original NBA Jam on SNES. The arcade original version was fine. It was just the SNES version and the Mega Drive version, or the home console version, that wasn't good because they took out a bunch of players for the home console versions. Okay, we're gonna do that.
Tonight's matchup, Warriors versus Knicks.
So this is probably going to be a bloodbath. It used to be such a good game, and now it's just almost, well, impossible to play. Oh! No way that should have gone in.
2 points. Heating up.
And I remember back in Australia, this was $2 a quarter, and it lasted for 2 minutes. And it was the biggest waste of money at the arcades.
Razzle dazzle.
Oh.
Heating up.
Oh dear. Oh man. I'm just not quick enough to play this game.
2 points.
Oh dear.
Heating up.
I think the A button is a little bit broken.
2 points.
What I mean by that is sometimes you press it and it will get stuck on the side a little bit. Oh crap. Oh, got it.
At the buzzer.
Well, I didn't get massacred as I expected, but I still lost. This is actually a pretty nice looking game for a GBA game. And just look how bright everything looks. Oops. 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 Dear. That feels very much like a Sonic game. Oh, okay. I suppose you could use the analog sticks for the stylus, which could work, I guess. Okay. So R2 lets me use this screen as the full screen, and L2 lets me use, and L2, if I press the R2 button, lets me use the top screen as the top screen. But there is a way to get both screens full screen, so that's good news. But I haven't worked out how to get out of this game yet. But maybe we'll worry about that a little bit later. Oops. So we're gonna stop it there. We're definitely gonna have to give Bare KnuckleZ a try. I've never seen this game before, so it'll be interesting to see what this is. Now, one game I do love is Streets of Rage Remake. Whoops. Ah. So it is a little bit harder to press those two buttons at the same time, A and B. Seems like A is stuck a little bit. Yeah, so if you're playing something like a beat 'em up, the buttons are going to get stuck if you're going to be pressing down too much. Whoever made this did a pretty good job with this game. I do like how it's 4 players. No. Okay, well, we'll get out of that. Okay. I think we should try... We know... Let's try Soul Calibur and Ikaruga. I have a feeling Crazy Taxi 2 probably runs slow on this, given it doesn't run that great on RG552. But we'll test Soul Calibur first. Now, I do feel like Dreamcast is a little bit more demanding than PSP. But Soul Calibur works on the RG351P, so this could potentially work on this.
Welcome back to the stage of history.
The audio crackling a little bit.
Versus Shanfa. Battle 1, fight!
Okay, so this plays pretty well. This definitely feels like it's running at 60 FPS. And this feels pretty good to play.
Battle 2, fight!
Now one thing about this is that my camera may not pick up 60 FPS as well. Like, I don't know if you can tell if this is 60 FPS or not. It might feel like it's a little bit slower once it's been recorded, but I can tell you that this feels like 60 FPS.
Versus Ivy. Battle 1, fight! This victory strengthened the soul of Kilik. You win! Battle 2, fight! This victory strengthened the soul of Kilik. You win!
that is okay then. And I thought playing Elden Ring was hard. This has got... that game has nothing on this. Okay. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that look at the RG503. I didn't do a full detailed review of this, but I hope you did get what you could out of this video. Now, in terms of whether you should pick up this device or not, I think this sits in the middle of the entry-level device, the RG351P, and also the RG552 at the other end of the spectrum. That is more the enthusiast device and has a lot more features. The processor is a little bit stronger as well. But in terms of pricing, it roughly sits in the middle between those other two devices. So I think it's kind of tricky, like in terms of whether you should get this or something else, because in terms of pricing, it's exactly where it should be, even though when you look at this device initially, it might feel like it's a little bit expensive. So I think this is retailing for about $140. And so, you know, if you wanted to get, say, like the PowerKitty X18S, which has a much stronger processor, but in terms of build quality, it's just not as good. If you spend up another $20, you can get a system that plays PSP and Dreamcast games fully. So that's also something to think about. You could also step down to the Retro Pocket 2 Plus, a device that I don't have at the moment, I haven't tested, but by all accounts that seems like that's got a pretty decent processor. I will say the only thing about that is that that has a smaller screen, so it has a 3.5 inch screen. So I think that device is more suited to games that use that 640 by 480 type of aspect ratio. So a lot of the older games, for example, would really suit that, like an NES or SNES would really suit that. Even though the processor there is probably stronger than what we've got right here. And that is $100. So you may want to go for that as well. But in terms of what Anbernic is trying to do here, they're really trying to give you something in between the RG351P and the RG552. And in terms of pricing, it sits exactly in the middle of those two devices. So yes, you could get the RG351P and save a little bit of money, but I think this plays enough PSP games that I don't think this is such a bad deal. And also it's a bit cheaper than the RG552 as well. So the RG552 is retailing for $220, so that's a fair jump up, like about $60, $70 jump up to get the RG552. And honestly, I don't think the RG552 plays enough PSP games that... I don't think the RG552 plays enough PSP games to justify getting the RG552. If you're thinking about PSP games, this will play a few more 60 FPS games, but not all of them. So that's something to really think about. Whereas this won't play 60 FPS games at 60 FPS, it will play them at like 30 FPS. And it should run the 30 FPS games just fine. And of course, if you have the RG351P as well, well, that really barely plays any PSP games. It might play you about 10 to 20% of the PSP library, but nowhere near enough to just say that this plays PSP games. Not only that, it plays it at a lower resolution as well. So this is 320 by 240. And this is 960 by 540p. So this is a much better PSP experience, but again, it only plays around about half the library. So I do think this is a little bit expensive, just in terms of this being $140 rather than comparing it between all of these devices. But I think if you were able to get a little bit of a discount for this, if this was closer to $100, maybe even like $120, I don't think this is such a bad device. At $120, this is a better device than the PowerKitty RGB10 Max 2. And then of course, if you're comparing between the two, this has a better processor because the RGB10 Max 2 has a Rockchip 3266, which is the one in here, the RG351P. So I think I've said enough about the price. The value is more or less the same as the RG552, so make of that what you will. Okay, so that's going to be it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. I'll see you guys in the next one.